Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks around the world. I'm Farrokh Mistree, and I'm delighted to welcome you to a conversation with Zoroastrian leaders on entrepreneurships, specifically creating economic, social, and intellectual value. This webinar series has been brought forward by the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce, and the focus of the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce is entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. We've had a number of webinars, and they are located at this website. The link to this webinar will come after the talk is over. The panelists today are Edul Daver, he's from Bombay IIT, Ruyintan Mehta, who is also from Bombay IIT, and Noshir Contractor, who is from Madras IIT. Edul will be focusing on the creation of economic value, Ruyintan on the creation of social value, and Noshir on the creation of intellectual value. Karishma Koka is our synthesizer. She's based in the United Kingdom. And we have dialogue initiators. These are three young Zoroastrians. Karen and Zain are based in Navsari, India. Karen is studying in Maharashtra. Zain is studying at Delhi University. And Vispi Karkaria, who has come to the United States and is at Northwestern University pursuing a PhD. Our conversation series is listed out here. Our focus is on providing an opportunity for parents and their children to think in terms of graduate education. And the webinars have been taped. And if you clicked on these links, you will get to the webinars. So on the 24th of October, we talked on planning where to study. On November 28th, we had a webinar on getting the most out of the college experience. On December the 19th, we had a webinar on scholarships and funding for higher education. And today, we have three panelists who are going to initiate the conversation on creating economic, social, and intellectual value. On February the 27th, we got a webinar on being happy as a Zoroastrian graduate student away from home. And the panelists will be Farzeen Avari, Karishma Koka, Hoshidar Pollard, and Noshir Mistree will be the synthesizer. The plan for today, we would like to finish on time, is that there'll be opening remarks by Edul and me. What this webinar is about, 10 minutes. Panelists, each of them have 8 minutes. That's 24 minutes. And then Karishma will come through and do a synthesis and initiate the dialogue. That's 6 minutes. And then there'll be a moderated question and answer session that Vispi will coordinate. Then there's a conversation with participants. So you could talk about anything you'd like for about 15 minutes. And then there'll be some closing remarks. The total we are shooting for is about 75 minutes. We will stop the recording and then we will continue with an informal dialogue. The last webinar, we went on for another hour or something like that after the webinar was closed. So with this, it's my pleasure to invite Edul to set the stage and explain to us, give the context for entrepreneurship. Edul, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. The word entrepreneurship has been used extensively, but most people do not have a clear understanding about how it came about and what it actually means. So I'd like to just take a few minutes to give you a little bit of background or history about it. It was in 1911 where Joseph Schumpeter, an Austrian economist, wrote a book called The Theory of Economic Development in German. And he had studied companies, small and large, and he explained that the concept of taking good care of your business with innovation was most visible in startups and small companies, and he called it Unternehmer, which is a German word, and literal translation means caretaker. With the rise of the political problems in Austria, he migrated to the USA in 1932 and became a professor at Harvard. The English edition of this book was published in 1934, and Unternehmer became entrepreneur. So that's the way the word was coined. Nothing much happened until the 1970s when the US started facing competitive pressures, and people started working about increasing productivity, and entrepreneurship, the word entrepreneurship gained prominence. It was around 1983 where Howard Stevenson, the guru of entrepreneurship at Harvard Business School, defined it as the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources controlled. This requires creativity, innovation, a desire to change, which in turn implies calculated risk. As noticed by Joseph Schumter, it is seen mostly in startups and small companies, but it is also seen in pockets of large corporations. Professionals practice it, nonprofits, social entrepreneurship, education, all these have an opportunity of using the concepts and benefiting from it. As such, today we're going to look at entrepreneurship as creating economic, social, and intellectual value. With that, back to you, Farrokh.
Thank you. So what are we about? The World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce, in partnership with the Zoroastrian faculty and academia, envision empowering Zoroastrian students to learn how to create economic, cultural, and intellectual value. So our emphasis is on providing an opportunity for Zoroastrian students and their parents to learn how to create economic, cultural, and intellectual value. The mission of the Zoroastrian Faculty Network is limited. It's to facilitate Zoroastrian youth through higher and specialized education to pursue careers in industry, government, and academia as business entrepreneurs, those who create economic value, social entrepreneurs, those who create social value, and knowledge entrepreneurs, those who create intellectual value. And what WZCC does is at the nexus of the creation of economic, social, and intellectual value. The webinars are meant to be conversations to help Zoroastrian youth with support of their parents to attain higher and specialized education. It is a conversation. It is not just where we come along and have people who say, this is what you should be doing, but the folks, the panelists will be seeding the conversation so that we can continue the dialogue into the future. This initiative is supported by the RT Setna Scholarship Funds and the ZF, which is an economic development fund started by the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce. So with that, it's my pleasure to invite Edul to share his thoughts on economic entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Farrokh. Just to give a little bit of background, I live in Greenbrook, New Jersey. I was born in Mumbai, India, but I spent most of my childhood in Secunderabad. And then my background consists of attending the Doon School in Dehradun, after which I did my Bachelor of Technology degree in Metallurgical Engineering from IIT Bombay. From there, it was to the US. I did my master's in powder metallurgy at the University of Wisconsin. Started working for a company making metal powders called Alcan Metal Powders. And at one point, we did a management buyout of that company and formed AccuPowder International. At that point, actually before that, I went part-time to school to get my MBA. But after forming AccuPowder International, I went back, took a course at Harvard Business School called OPM, Owner, President, Manager, which was an extremely powerful course, and I benefited from it. I retired in 2012 as ex-owner and now ex-owner and CEO of AccuPowder International. And after retirement, focused on non-profit endeavors such as, and just completed my term as global president of WZCC. I'm still involved with ZF as a trustee and the ZFM. And my passion is building the spirit of entrepreneurship. I see this as a very, very powerful opportunity for people to think about and practice it if they find it suitable. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my academic journey, the journey's lessons, entrepreneurship itself, and tips to young Zoroastrians. The basic tagline which I'm going to focus on is, if you can dream it, you can do it. This is just not a slogan. I'll show you that anything that you can dream and think of, you can do. My academic journey involved going to school and getting an all-round education. Studies was important, but sports, social interaction was just as important. I was very small in stature and always wanted to be in the in crowd, so to speak. And I really took to sports, and I did very well in hockey, got my colors in the sports blazer. And this gave me a tremendous amount of confidence. I was very, if you want to call, conscious of myself, and this really allowed me to gain confidence. So I sort of credit my school to give me who gave me the ingredients of success, which comprise of confidence, discipline, and character. And then I got into IIT Bombay, which was another confidence booster. And I took metallurgical engineering because of my interest, and first in maths, which led me towards engineering, and then inorganic chemistry. IIT Bombay, 5 years actually went off very smoothly. Along the way, again, I was involved in sports, and I also had my so-called girlfriend, who later became my wife, and I had a capitalistic streak, which made me think about coming to the United States very, very early in the game. Was a Tata scholar, and then I got a research assistantship in University of Wisconsin. So here I come, USA, and I was completely brimming with confidence. At that point, I felt I could do almost anything. Looking at my academic and professional journey, what were some of the lessons that I learned? One thing I learned is that everyone wants to do things they like to do, but happiness is not only doing what you enjoy doing, but enjoying what you have to do. The other item is network, network, network. Nothing beats networking. Take every opportunity to meet anyone and everyone. And keep in mind that networking is a two-way street. You also have to give to the other party to receive in return. Another item which is very close to the Zarathustra thing, characteristics, is nothing beats honesty, integrity, credibility, and faith that things will happen. Education is another item, which is an ongoing process. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, live as if you are going to die tomorrow, but learn as if you're going to live forever. So the concept of acting now and learning forever. And as I've mentioned many times before, nothing gets done on your own. You have to have a team and cooperation. So you take the best of each of us to make the best world for all of us. Also that economic, social, and intellectual value always coexist. It overlaps, and our focus should be to maximize this overlap. You're very, very busy doing everything in life. So always remember that work is not the only thing, and you have to have a work and family balance. So these are some of my lessons which I'd like to pass on to the younger people to keep in mind as they go forward. Now, talking about entrepreneurship and creating economic value. And then it comprises of like all four components. One is seek and recognize an opportunity. Very often, your entrepreneur sees an opportunity when others do not. Once the opportunity has been identified and you need a team and you're working as a team, you have to develop a shared vision. Everyone has to buy into your vision. And then your job is to inspire, motivate, and lead by example. The third element is acting. You never have all the answers when you start something. So you have to act, and you have to act with limited information on hand. You just have to do it. You cannot be afraid of failure. If you fail, you make corrections and try again and move on. So to make any of your endeavors successful, you have to act with purpose, passion, persistence, and of course, a little bit of help always works. And the fourth component is what I call value-driven. You need to be transparent, to reward people when they succeed, celebrate, make sure everyone has a stake in the success of what you're doing. And with that comes happiness. And the cycle then gets repeated. You go on to new targets and new objectives and repeat the process. And nothing breeds success more than success itself. So tips for young Zoroastrians is seek input from your parents, role models, talk to everyone, but you make the final decision. Please don't do something just because your parents said do it, you know. So you have to buy into your parents' suggestion or come up with your own suggestion and do what you want to do. A well-rounded in education is very important. Explore, learn, and network with people. Stay connected with your community as a expanded family. Give back to the humanity, give back to the community, and don't just talk about it, walk the talk. Always remember that be positive, optimistic, because dreams unite us and fears divide us. With that, I think that entrepreneurship makes the impossible possible. And I'd like to just end with two examples. One was when I started my company, we bought the company. We had to borrow $12 million and with a down payment of 200,000. So that was a debt to equity ratio of 1:60. So we had an extremely high debt burden. At the same time, it was an old plant. We had environmental issues. Also had a very powerful steelworkers union, which was a sort of a confrontational union. And at that point, it was a break-even operation. Every advice I got was don't do it. Okay. So, but I had worked there. I felt there were things that we could change. We could make it happen. And of course, there's hundreds of things that we did, but we did make it happen. So that's one example which I would like to give of said, making the impossible possible. The second was a very community-oriented project of building our Darimir. When we started, we figured we needed about $3.5 million, and we started working on it. And everyone thought it was ridiculous. It would never happen. Okay. And one by one, taking small steps at a time, we came to a point that we had in half the amount of money, and we set a target to actually break down the old Darimir even before we had all the monies on hand. And that was not done just arbitrarily, but with entrepreneurship, we felt we had the ingredients in it. And if we showed people a half-built building, we would get the monies required, and that's exactly what happened. And so again, an example of making the impossible possible. So I'd like to end again with my tagline: if you can dream it, you can do it. So don't give up on anything. Thank you. Farrokh, and I'd like to pass it on now to Ruyintan to talk about social entrepreneur.
Thank you very much, Edul. I am actually almost a neighbor of Edul. I live in Wachang, a little small town of 5,000 people in north central New Jersey. I was born in Ahmedabad in India, and my background in some ways is fairly similar to Edul's. I got my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from IIT Bombay. And like it was the norm in those days, I moved on to the US and earned several master's degrees in chemical engineering and engineering administration. I was a serial entrepreneur in the plastics industry, and I sold my last company in 2013. Since then, I have been involved almost entirely in technology-enabled philanthropy. And I currently serve as the president of an organization called Wheels India Niswarth Foundation. Wheels stands for, it was started by alumni from various IITs in the US to give back to India. And Wheels stands for water, health, education, energy, livelihoods, and sustainability. I also currently serve as the president of IIT Gandhinagar Foundation. And in the past, I was the president of IIT Bombay Heritage Foundation in the US. I have a strong desire to give back to India in the areas that I just mentioned above, and mainly in water and health and in higher technical education. I consider myself as a social entrepreneur who likes to get his feet wet and hands dirty. So can you please move on to the next slide? So my academic journey, I won't repeat. I was very fortunate to study at a ridiculously low cost, which is why the urge to continue to give back. In our time, the total cost to study at IIT Bombay, including tuition, room and board, and even going for movies, didn't exceed more than 2,000 rupees a year. And having received an excellent education at zero cost, that to me was the path to my success. The biggest influencers that I had were the teachers at St. Xavier's High School in Ahmedabad, where I studied, and later on at IIT Bombay, including also a professor under whom I did some of my research work here in the US. Some of the lessons that I learned, mainly in the US, was I mentioned earlier that I was a serial entrepreneur, having either started from scratch or purchased other companies and bought and sold a total of 6 different companies in the plastics industry over a period of 26 years in New Jersey, California, in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and even in Brampton, Ontario. I remain now deeply involved in social causes. And even during the years while I was running my company, I ended up doing the same thing. Basically, while you can consider making money, you need to maintain a strong internal value system. And in all cases, I strongly believe that technology-based social impact has a great deal of value. You apply science and technology to solve practical problems, either at work or in the nonprofit arena in which you get involved. But in all cases, one needs to remain cost conscious in order to achieve ultimate success. For example, while I was a participant, not a very active one, at Zagni events in New York, I learned that critical assistance fund was one of the most important aspects that Zagni had. So I actually used that concept at one of my companies, where we would give unasked for any great reason, any employee who would demand that they had a problem and they couldn't find $500, we would give them a loan and charge them a 1% interest and deduct that amount from the salary that they would be earning over the next year. We were told that that was one of the most successful initiatives the employees felt that the company had. In terms of creating social value, once again, technology-enabled philanthropy remains the motto to the NGO that I belong to. Again, REALS stands for water, health, energy, education, rural livelihoods, and sustainability. And since the time I have been in the US, my fervent desire has been to give back to the country that I love and where I was born, in India, at least 50% of my net worth. One of the areas that we strongly pursue is to support young entrepreneurs with seed funding to start socially beneficial projects in water-related businesses. For example, our organization, WIN Foundation, has teamed up with another NGO that I also belong, called Maker Bhavan Foundation, to start and award significant prizes called the Vishwakarma Prize in Engineering Innovation for water and sanitation. And it is open to any student teams in India, with the first prize at 5 lakhs, second prize at 2 lakhs, and third prize at 1 lakh, and each participating team, the top 10 teams, would get 50,000 rupees. Some of the tips for the young Zoroastrians is, philanthropy is in the DNA of Zoroastrians. In fact, I was able to find a quote from our prophet Zarathustra, asked his followers to attain happiness by making others happy. And I'm told that that's Yasna 43:1. Essentially, give back giving back can start at any age. It doesn't have to be in large numbers. You can start small and start increasing your contribution as you find that you are able to spare a little bit. You can join any society or organization that appeals to your passion without any financial motives. And finally, the last step, in my humble opinion, is remain secular in your approach without carrying your religion on your sleeve. An excellent example are the Tata Trusts. They are totally secular in their giving back to our society in India. And I'd like to pass on to Noshir to talk about intellectual values.
Thank you, Ruyintan. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, no, you're
Thank you.
absolutely audible.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all for joining us at this time of the day or evening, as the case may be. So my name is Noshir Contractor, and my background, I was born in India in a small town called Chakratarpur, which is now in Jharkhand. Then it was in the state of Bihar. My undergraduate was in electrical engineering from IIT Madras. Before that, I traveled a lot because my dad worked for the Indian Railways. And so I did most of my schooling was in St. Xavier's in Kolkata, and then 2 years in St. Francis in Lucknow before I moved to IIT Madras. While I was in IIT Madras, I was interested in a variety of applications of electrical engineering. And so when it came time for me to choose a PhD program, I was especially interested in doing research on looking at the implications and the impacts of communication technologies. And that's where I got my PhD in that area at the University of Southern California from the Annenberg School for Communication. And since then, I moved to, from 1987 to 2007, I was at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And since 2007, I have been here at Northwestern University in Evanston. While I was in IIT Madras, in addition to being interested in these social implications, I was also very involved in being the literary secretary, involved in organizing intercollegiate debates, elocution, and other sort of more literary and cultural events at the university there. My passion, I would say, has certainly been research, trying to answer questions, or in the context of what we're talking about today, having a higher, trying to create intellectual capital value. Most of my work is focused on both understanding and enabling networks. So that's where the engineering parts of it comes in. I'm very passionate about mentoring students, especially as I get older. That to me is the best legacy we can leave. And I'm also very committed to globalizing research networks, working with people across disciplines and across the globe. My tagline is Think Networks. It's a very simple tagline, and it has certainly been an organizing principle for my life, both personally and professionally. My academic journey really has been symptomatic of being what we call whole brain education. That is not just relying on sort of the engineering side, which is sort of the STEM approaches, things like science, technology, engineering, math, nor has it only been on the artistic and humanistic side. I think throughout my education, my parents basically infused in me a great deal of commitment to having this whole brain education, and that has stood me well over the decades. I was very interested in leveraging the rigor of my undergraduate degree in electrical engineering, but then applying that to understand and enhance the role of social networks in organizing. So even though I didn't stay as an electrical engineer, what I learned in engineering school, what I learned at IIT has been absolutely fundamental in the ways in which I understand the world and try to address the challenges of the world. As I mentioned, my main focus, a continuing theme through my work, has been to try to research how new technological innovations, as they come about, whether it has been earlier on simple things like email to the web and now on to the metaverse, how these technological innovations are disrupting the ways in which we work, both positively and negatively disrupting the way we work. The lessons from my academic journey are that innovations and intellectual value comes primarily from combining existing knowledge in novel ways. And what that means is that different people are specializing in different areas, but what we can gain new intellectual value is by trying to see combined ways of insights that have not been combined before. And seeing how we can apply this to solve real problems in the world. So when I say keeping your research honest by making it responsive to practical needs, I'm thinking of practical needs where, for example, today we are looking at a variety of different social issues, social challenges, as well as opportunities, and how can the research that we do be tied in, at least in the long term, to be able to address those practical needs. And what this basically means is that each of us is going to build deep expertise in one area and then try to bridge close ties with collaborators who have deep expertise in other areas. One of the things that is clear to all of us as I look at the process of creating intellectual value is that the big societal challenges that we face today, whether it is climate change, whether it is the COVID crisis, whether it is our vision of becoming an interplanetary species and heading out to the moon and then on to Mars. All of these great challenges that we face needs research that happens in a lot of different fields. No single discipline can solve these problems, and no single researcher within each of these disciplines for sure can solve these problems. We all want to be able, therefore, get expertise, know a lot about a particular area, but then reach out and collaborate in networks with people who have expertise in different areas. And I would say that coming up with good ideas is in some ways the easy part. It's the fun part, because you can armchair yourself through coming up with a terrific set of ideas. Executing those ideas with persistence and tenacity is the key. And I think what distinguishes good intellectual value being created is not just coming up with the idea, but the persistence and tenacity. And as I mentioned, we can only do that by building and bridging networks across disciplines, across geography, and importantly, across career stages. I like to say that if I don't have mentors who are at least 20 years or 30 years junior to me, then I'm failing. And yes, I did mean to say mentors, not mentees, because we learn from intergenerations in ways that are incredibly valuable to all of us. Finally, I would say on this point, be generous in giving credit to others. There is plenty of credit to be given around. And I think that one of the things we learn is that it doesn't take away, it's not a zero-sum game where it takes away from you if you also bring credit to all the other collaborators that you're working with. Finally, in closing, for tips for young Zoroastrians, in this context of journey, what I would say is I have always benefited from ZZZ, the Zoroastrian zest and zeal for life. There's something about our community that has always been something that has energized us. And I see that as something that has been very important. It was something that was instilled in me by my parents, by my grandparents and family members. And it has been a very central part of my life. What I've also said in terms of my tagline is that when you make networks, ask not what the network can do for you, but what you can do for the network. Many people think of networking as an icky factor, as something that is sleazy, as slimy, because it's almost utilitarian. You're reaching out to someone only because you think that they can help you. My suggestion to all of us who are trying to deal with this ick factor associated with networking is don't approach other people with the goal of trying to see what they can do for you, but what you can do for them. And the reciprocity ring will take care of it. You might be able to learn about what they're doing, see how you can help them, who will help others, who might then in turn come back and help you. So that's the ways in which I believe in how in the short term, you make networks, but in the long term, it's networks that make you. And that has certainly been true for me, which is exactly why I believe in the tagline, Think Networks. Karishma?
Thank you, Noshir. All our speakers today have highlighted different aspects of the World Zarathushtri Chamber of Commerce so that we can go beyond resources controlled and develop competencies such that the emergent property, both of our competencies individually and of the network, is true entrepreneurship, so that we build and share happiness. The World Zarathushtri Chamber of Commerce, at its foundation, has two concepts: integrity and industriousness. One without the other is truly incomplete, but the creativity and innovation, together with a desire to change, requires very fundamentally a domain overlap, an integrated approach that results in action that fructifies when the overlap between the economic, the social, and the intellectual domains is optimized, different at different times, constantly changing and adapting to bring out the best in industry and in individuals. Edul spoke of the economic aspects primarily, which then have ramifications into the social and intellectual, no doubt. He said, if you can dream it, you can do it. With confidence, discipline, and character, combined with the ethics of honesty, integrity, and credibility, the ability to act in the now with responsibility is able to, what he says, combine the concept of networks and individuals to give purpose and passion, persistence and providence, that ability to take decisions that can not only grow the network and the industry, but give us the ability to walk the talk. So with that foundation in economic principles, Ruyintan then highlighted to us how the technology that comes from good innovation results in good social impact. The word niswart itself means without the self. And this innovative work allows us to apply science and technology in a combinatorial approach with critical thinking and skills and innovation to benefit social causes at all levels. For example, he talked about education, he talked about water. This internal value system which he has developed and maintains and passes on to others has a very sensitive cost consciousness. This cost is not just financial, but it's also the cost of people, the cost of time, the cost of other people's values and ethics, so that the technology-enabled philanthropy can develop secularly to move that passion, that technology towards the good of all, so that he says, results in what Asho Zarathustra says in 43.1 Yasnaha, Ushta mai, yamai, ushta kamaichi. Happiness comes to one who brings happiness to others. So now that he showed us how to walk the talk from economic to social, Noshir then grounded it back in the intellectual, since building wisdom and knowledge is the Zarathustra precept. He says we can't do this alone. He constantly talked about the importance of the network, not just externally, not just between people, not just between different domains, but he also talked about the network within the brain box, the whole brain education. So while he says engineering or whatever field one's own specialty is critical, and being a master of that is important, globalization requires a research network around the world, whether it be for fundamental challenges like water, food, or approaches to bigger things like going to another planet. And disruptive innovation with research that is kept honest. And when he says honest, he means not just integrity, but honestly responding to that which is needed in the now, requires a different approach from what many people realize. He says we need the depth of our own experience and the breadth together with good connectivity to appreciate what other people are doing and to be able to draw from them in a collaborative spirit to bring about combinations that from which the emergent property can be the solution, for which we need to build reciprocity rings. So these, as if you like, the rings between the economic, the social and intellectual, and their integral overlap allows us to think about our own journey so that we find with our passion and purpose that sweet spot where we can listen, reflect, and observe so that we decide to grow ourselves and others. And this Shautananam, the good, just action that we take in our journey, builds not only the Ushta for ourselves, but the happiness or Ushta with harmony for the whole world. So we go on from building wisdom in the intellectual domain to taking good action to build economic prosperity and having social impact that starts from wisdom and ends in Frasho Kerati, or the building of a better world. To take us further in this journey, as you start putting your own questions into the chat box, we have three very bright individuals. Ervad Vispi Karkaria has a background as he's pursuing a PhD in mechanical engineering. He not only has been mentored by Farrokh and Janet Allen, but he continues this journey under their guidance to mentoring other people, such as Zian, who himself is helping catalyze the journey forward with other people as he maintains a contact with 2 high school students and mentors them. Now, Vispi, in the intellectual domain, takes this whole journey forward, having published 10 papers and has 5 patents in the intellectual entrepreneurial journey himself. Zian Pitawala has a background with a BSc honors in biochemistry and also pursues additional courses in IIT. Now, Zian has won the Harvard Hackathon, developing an app to diagnose tuberculosis. It's a solution finder that can be applied in different domains with a little adaptation. So it is very much a social entrepreneurship journey in data science, and he tutors others and maintains a blog to share knowledge. Karen Pitawala focuses on the economic value she has and can develop through how she adds value. She pursues a BSc in computer science and software, tutors others both in an orphanage and in how to learn technologies within her university. Seeking to excel herself, her research is in cybersecurity. So if we go back to the domains of intellectual, economic, and social impacts that the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce gives us as a model to follow and build upon, securing the value people have to offer is key. That is why integrity is foundational to industriousness. With this, I'll hand over to Vispi Karkaria to take us further on this journey of questioning and solution finding. Vispi.
Thank you very much for the beautiful synthesis. And now, as we go on, I would like to invite Karen to ask her question.
My question is directed to Edul Daver. The first question is that, how can I find out whether my academic project is commercially feasible or not?
Thank you, Karen. It's a very fundamental question when you develop something. There's a mantra in entrepreneurship that we say, be first, be different, be best. So first, let's look at your project and say, is it a completely new idea? Is it first in the marketplace? If you're first in the marketplace, obviously, you're also the best in the field because you're the only one. And you have very little competition, and the chances of succeeding are extremely high. If you're not the first, then how are you different to the other products that you will be competing with? Is it different enough? Is there enough differentiation? If there is sufficient differentiation, again, you've got an advantage. The third is being best, which means that you're not the first, there are other people in the business, and you're competing basically on quality. And you have to make sure that you're best. And that's probably the most difficult of the 3 situations. Once you do that, obviously you need to talk to people, in that field, and in your field, you'll know, the most about it. Do some calculations, some rough numbers, but these are guesstimates at best, because no one can guarantee that your numbers are going to come out exactly the way you developed them. So if you believe in it, do some estimates, take the plunge. No one can guarantee upfront that it will be successful, but it's your faith, your persistence, your creativity and innovation that will determine the success of the project. I hope this gives you a rough idea of what you asked,
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your beautiful answer. Now, as we continue, I would request Zian to ask his question.
Yes, so my question is directed towards Ruyintan Mehta. How do social entrepreneurs raise funds for the noble cause?
The first step in doing that is to actually put some skin in the game yourself. So if you want to call yourself a social entrepreneur, you have to first come up with whatever you believe you can afford to give back in the field that you want to really pursue. Then the second step would be to network within your community of peers and also others who think similarly to you. So these days, personally giving you an example, I'm very, very active in the IIT alumni community, both for IIT Bombay, IIT Gandhinagar, and also Pan IIT USA. So when we formed Wheels Global Foundation, and we were building, for example, we built 8 clean drinking water plants, in actually more than that, about 14 of them in Telangana and in Gujarat. We wanted to do more. So we went to a guy who is a quiet Indian-American billionaire living in New Jersey, whom I'd never known, called Chirag Patel, and asked him if he would fund $50,000 to build 8 more plants in Gujarat. Not only did he do that, he actually said that he wanted to pursue his own dream and wanted to give us a couple of $1 million to form what is called as Wheels India Niswarth Foundation, with 2 verticals in water and sanitation and in maternal and child health. And since then, we have been extremely active using his funds to do all kinds of interesting projects. So networking, as both Noshir has mentioned and Edul has mentioned, are the key here to raising funds. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
so
for
much.
your answer. And now as we continue, I would like to ask my question to Noshir Contractor. And the question is, how can a graduate student build up entrepreneurship skills while continuing to create intellectual value?
Thank you again, Vispi. That's a very exciting question. And I would perhaps expand the question to be not just about how a graduate, but any student, including undergraduate students, who can build up entrepreneurship skills while continuing to create intellectual value. I'd like to give an example of how I went through that experience myself, and because I think it provides a lot of inspiration, and what took me by surprise when it happened. Shortly after arriving here at Northwestern, I was teaching an undergraduate class on social network analysis, which is one of the areas that I do my research in. And there was a second-year undergraduate student, what in the United States we call a sophomore, who was a student in the class, and he came up to me after class one day, this was in about the third class, and said, I'm really excited about what we are learning in this class, and I think I'd like to start a company with you, co-found a company with you that can provide consulting services to variety of organizations, both for-profit as well as non-profit, on how they can use the power of network analysis to help them. At that moment, I said, well, first, I would like to see how well you do in this class before making any commitments to jumping into a startup with you. And he waited, and at the end of the quarter, he did pretty well. And so came back to me and he said, I'd like to be able to do this. I really have a lot of passion. And by that time, on his own, he had been able to take a song of one of his friends' roommates at another university and actually make that song onto the top of the list on the Apple charts at the time. And he did it just by intuition. And so he knew he had the ability to think through this issue. I told him that I'm happy to work with him, but I, as a researcher, did not have the core skills required to the entrepreneurial skills that were required to be able to do a startup company. And again, it was part of this network idea. And he said, sure. He says, I'll just go and reach out to other people. We'll practice what we have been learning about networks. And he reached out to alumni from Northwestern who had startup companies. He reached out to our own entrepreneurial center. He reached out to members of the board of trustees of Northwestern. And to my surprise and happiness, many of these individuals were taking very seriously this young student and what they were trying to do. And we were able to take the company, it incubated for a year at the startup incubator at Northwestern. And then within about 3 or 4 years, it was earning revenues in the millions of dollars. And then, like many other startup companies, it was finally acquired. The key takeaway from the story is that, as again, if you are willing to work with people, and in this case, the hub of the network was the student. I should say his name is Zachary Johnson. And Zach was a student, and he knew that he had to assemble various people who would be able to then provide resources, guidance, advice to take his idea. But he had the passion. It was his idea to go forward with this. And I was very inspired to see the name of the company that he created was called Syndio Social, and it has now, as I said, been acquired. And he's gone on to work now in a people analytics firm called Visair Software. So I think that there are ways to do this, and the process of the story that I said hopefully will give insight and inspiration.
Thank you very much for the super answer. I think it will help us a lot to work on this field. And now I would request Farrokh Mistree to continue.
Thank you. I believe we have some time for another round of questions, so please go ahead, Vispi.
Sure. So as we move on to another round of questions, I would request Karen to pose her question.
Yeah, so another question directed to Edul Daver. How can I find investors for starting my company if I need to raise a capital?
Thank you, Karen. That's the million-dollar question for any entrepreneur. Where do I get money from? So I would say it depends a lot on what stage you are at. If you're just starting and depending on the scope of the project, it could be your own savings. It could be help from your parents and friends who believe in you. And, and in today's world, it could also be by crowdfunding, like Kickstarter and GoFundMe. A lot of people have been able to raise $50,000 type levels with these type of crowdfunding mechanisms. Once you have a proven idea and you want to take it further, obviously, then you have to get into the professional field of lending, which means you have to find an angel funder who is going to take a chance on you. You have to convince the individual that you have a good idea and they're willing to put money out because it would be a high risk proposition, and they will probably want a part of the action. That means they would want part of the ownership of the interest in your company. You can also go to a financial institution, but they will want collateral. So you have to be in a position to provide some collateral. Once you're past the angel funding stage, you have venture capitals. So you can have a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 venture capitalists, depending on where you are in the process. And now you're talking of big dollars, which would be available. Again, they would want a share of the equity. And basically, you have to find the venture capitalist who sort of specializes in your field. Now, if you've already started a company and you want some money, ZF, WZCC is offering money for growth purposes. We can't get into something which is brand new idea because the money we've collected are donations and we want to be sure we get the monies back. So if you've got a company which has started and has some cash flow and you're confident of being able to pay back the loan, ZF is an opportunity. We're giving loans of 25 lakhs in India and up to $50,000 in the US. Once you're past the venture capital size, you've got private equity. You can go big with private equity. You can go with an IPO and go public. So that's going. And there are other forms of financing also. Government offers a lot of funding. If it's a medical field, NIH can offer funding for research and growth. There's also something called asset-based financing where you can use your assets that you have and borrow against it. So, you have a whole range of places you can get monies from. You have to keep striving at it. For example, when we wanted the money for our company, we approached 20 different financial institutions before we found someone who was really interested in doing an asset-based lending deal with us. So with that, I'm sure you'll find the money. If you have your idea and will, you can find the money for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Edul, for the comprehensive answer.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite Zian to ask his question.
My question is directed to Ruyintan Mehta only. How do our Zoroastrian values help in pursuit of entrepreneurship?
You're muted. Ruyintan, you're muted.
It's embarrassing to say that, but almost all of us on this webinar are Zarthostis, with a few exceptions. But we are held in extremely high regard. And I will narrate that with two examples. When we were seeking funding, I mentioned the name Chirag Patel, who gave us several $1 million over the last 3 years. One of his requirements to form WIN Foundation, which is a separate entity, was 2 things. Number one, he came from Ahmedabad. So he wanted this foundation to be headquartered in and around Ahmedabad. We did it at IIT Gandhinagar. Gandhinagar, as you all know, is the new capital of Gujarat, very close to Ahmedabad. The second one that he and his father insisted was, they wanted me to run the foundation. And I said, why me? You guys have millions of Patels who would be very glad to run it for you. He said, no, we believe and trust a Zarthosti like you who will manage our money well in areas that we want to do. I call that as an example of Zoroastrian value. Second example, through WIN Foundation, we did a pilot plant at IIT Kharagpur, where we took 10% of its sewage stream and made potable water grade quality at a highly affordable cost. We wanted to now, the professors there at IIT Kharagpur, whom we were funding, wanted to do it for the entire community of IIT Kharagpur, students, faculty, staff, and so on, which is about 45,000 people, to demonstrate that at larger scale. So that requires several $1 million again. And one of the guys who stepped up to the plate, he would like to be the lead donor, is a gentleman called Arjun Malhotra, who is a IIT Kharagpur alumni, distinguished alumni, and he was a co-founder of HCL. Again, he used similar terms. He says, Ron, that's what people call me. He says, Ron, if you are leading the project, I don't have any problems that our money will be managed well. And I said, why do you say that? Again, he said that that's because you are a Parsi. So I hope that I almost cringed at that, because I don't use that to generate funds, but it is our inherent Zoroastrian values that helps in pursuit of entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your beautiful answer. And as we continue, I would like to ask Noshir Contractor that what are the challenges for a professor to start a company?
Thanks, Vispi. Plenty of challenges for a professor to start a company. And first, I should preface it by saying that not every professor needs to start a company. As a professor, especially after you've been promoted and received what we call as tenure, which is in a sense like a permanent position, we have, as faculty members, a variety of different options in front of us. Some of those options would include continuing to do research, build a research center. Others might be to partner with government agencies to help with policy. Yet others might be to do consulting in organizations. And for others still, maybe it's just primarily mentoring students, the next generation of students in this area. So given that not every professor needs to be starting a company, those who want to go that route will then have to decide what kind of a company they want to create. Is it a company that is specifically leveraging technique or an idea or an innovation that they have helped to discover, or a patent that they have been able to file? Or is it specifically, or is it focused more on a specific context? And that context, again, could be a nonprofit context. It could be a particular segment of society, or it could be a particular sector of industry. That said, I think that the central issues that have to be addressed by anyone, or the sort of steps that we have to go through, is again going back to the network. And that is, you need to recognize that while you might build expertise and possess expertise in one area and contribute that expertise towards the goal of the company that you want to start, that company is going to require a lot of different areas of expertise. And being humble enough to recognize that you can't do it all, not just because of the time limits that you have, the bandwidth that you have to devote to it, but also because fundamentally you don't have the expertise in those areas. And being able to give credit to others and recognizing that you're working with equal partners on a wide variety of areas and making sure you listen to them and deferring to them on decisions on areas where they have more expertise, I think are some of the keys that I have learned in the startup company, for example, that I described previously, the companies that I started with my undergraduate student. So I would say that those are some of the challenges, but again, not everyone needs to start a company, and we have different ways in which we can create intellectual value and then translate that intellectual value to societal value or to economic value.
Thank you very much for your answer. It was very insightful. And now as we continue, I would request Farrokh Mistree to take over.
Great. So we are now open for questions in the chat from the participants. Please direct your questions to a panelist, or if it's to all three panelists, to all three panelists. So Karishma is monitoring the chat. And Karishma, what do we have in the chat?
We have a question from me.
Good.
It says, with reference to both scholarship and also to the Zartushti Entrepreneurial Development Fund, do we, 1, seek to design a project with the intent to commercialize, or study and build knowledge so that we can then, when appropriate, commercialize as necessary? Or 3, if our talent is simply on building intellectual solutions, then we focus on that in whichever part of life we are in. I'll put that question to 3 people. First to Noshir, then to Edul to answer for the ZF.
So this is a very interesting question, and I can see it's a very integrative sort of question in terms of trying to recognize that could we then use the same idea of networks that we've talked about to design a project in all of these areas. I think that, again, to me, I think the idea is interesting. I think that it would require a certain amount of reflection on how to be able to do that. And if the idea, if I understand correctly, Karishma, are you suggesting that this project should try to do all 3 in a certain sequential order, or is it just do any one of these and specialize in that?
The question is really to help us think about this. Together with our parents, we form a team. Together with our professors and our mentors, we form a network and a team. And we all go through this process, sometimes simultaneously, sometimes at different parts of our life. And some of us don't have the talent for 2 of the others. Some of us are designed to be entrepreneurs. Others are designed to be intellectuals. So maybe as a society, we are the network. So how do we have this application of the listen, reflect, and decide, so that we accept where we stand and how best we can contribute, either individually, in a team, or then seek to build the team? How do we find that dialogue with our parents and our mentors?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question. And besides referring to the fact, I've seen models of this that are now being applied in a lot of universities, where universities are creating in-house sort of incubators that provide a common space for people with each of these different skills to work. We have one here at Northwestern that is aptly named The Garage. It takes its inspiration from the garage from the mini garages that in Silicon Valley that resulted in many of the big companies that such as Hewlett Packard and others. And I see that there are infrastructures and incentives that we can put in place to facilitate these kinds of dialogues. And then it's basically waiting to see how people might be able to take advantage of the, of these kind of catalytic platforms to provide those kinds of integrations. I think it is a network issue. I think it's a good issue. I don't know how well the Zoroastrian community has been engaged in this so far, but I see a lot of potential. So I think you're onto something there.
Thank you, Noshir. Edul, for the ZF, for the Zartushti Entrepreneurship Development Fund, and from the point of view of scholarships that the World Zartushti Chamber of Commerce is seeking to offer, your insight, please. With the 6 years of your work at the helm that have, together with Farrokh and the whole team, brought us to this point.
Yeah, I'd like to say a little bit about sort of the earlier response from Noshir. As we talked about, you mentioned parents. It's very important that parents, you have a discussion with parents, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of parents are not in a position to help out because they know very little bit about entrepreneurship. So one of the things we are trying to do is also educate the parents. In my case, it was different because some of the things my grandfather did, my mother would constantly relate it to me at the dining table. So I had a role model or an example to do. So if parents can do that, it obviously be very helpful. Now, WZCC is doing that at a small scale. And in India, we have Coffee with WZCC. We have people meeting now, again, because of COVID, things haven't slowed down, where people meet and at a Starbucks and have mentors there and have people interested in ideas chatting away over coffee on a monthly basis. UK has started that. Zubin Setna has started that in the UK. So that's an opportunity to interact, develop ideas and go forward. As far as ZF goes, unfortunately, as I said earlier, we are operating on donated funds. So we can't support or give money for someone who just has an idea. So we only do it after the idea has been commercialized to a certain amount where we know there's cash flow and we can get the money back, okay? As far as the scholarship goes, this is something brand new. ZF has decided that we would take 15% of the monies and afford and provide a scholarship of up to $30,000 for someone who wants to study a master's degree in entrepreneurship. So here now we are going into the education field a little bit. We've put a couple of notices, announcements out. We've received a couple of people with interested, but they are in different fields. One's in medical, one's in chemical engineering. We haven't found anyone who specifically wants to do entrepreneurship yet. But I'm hoping if you can spread the word, everyone, the money's there. Let's get someone to apply for the university and we, walk the talk.
Thank you, Edul. You've also now, through the work of the World Zartushti Chamber of Commerce, bridged this gap through the Find the Leader in You program and the other younger leader programs. So there is now the beginning, the bridge, and the sight of the end, which then you follow through with mentorship models and how to write applications. So there's all this mentoring now in the WZCC in the various different chapters and integrated at a global level. Maybe please have the question from Melvin Mehta, Yazdi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you very much, Farrokh, Edul, Ruyintan. Noshir, you don't have to do this. You're doing this really much appreciated, really. I'm originally from Bombay, have been in London now coming to 15 years, and I'm a startup entrepreneur, dare I say. And my question to all three of you, please, is how do I now start building my team and recruit the right kind of people into my business? Some tips and filters in my mind that I should use would be gratefully received. Thank you.
May I address this to Edul, please? And then Ruyintan.
As far as getting partners into and working with you. Obviously, they have to be in the field and they have to be as passionate as you to want to do it. So in some cases, it might be people who have interest and the financial, ability to help you. But make sure whatever you do, they become part of your team all the way. That means they also share in the success of the company. So either they get equity in the company, or they have a very strong profit sharing. They're tremendous motivators, and that's very important also. Okay.
Sure.
But the
Ruyintan?
key thing is fire in the belly. They have to be with
Yes.
you and share your vision. Thank you.
I think Edul covered part of it. You need to first have an absolutely clear definition of what you intend to do. And then you find some like-minded people who are willing to make the sacrifice. Mostly it'll be a financial sacrifice. One of the other most important things is also to have adequate startup funding. And it's called FNF, Friends and Family, is probably the #1 area where you will be able to find your initial startup fund. No bank will give you even a penny unless you have some adequate plan with projections and whether your system, whatever your concept is, well enough to be given some possible funding. I'm not familiar about what happens in the UK, but in the US for many years, I was a mentor to an organization called SCORE. SCORE is a resource arm of the US Small Business Administration. In the past, it used to stand for Service Corporation of Retired Executives. And people like me and Edul and others are mentors, and we give free advice in any aspect of an entrepreneur's journey, be it whether how to lease, how to write a business plan, and wide variety, where to seek funding, and so on and so forth. These services are offered free of charge, and they should be availed of. I'm sure that there are similar things in India. In fact, at one time, I wanted to have a SCORE type chapter started in India, but the US Small Business Administration knocked us down saying this was only for US citizens.
Right. So,
Noshir, Melvin, could we also, after you finish your question, bring Noshir into this? Thank you, Melvin.
Yeah. Now I was kind of responding to Ruyintan really that the business actually doesn't require any funding. That's we are sorted. I think what we need is now for the business to go to the next level, the right kind of people. And when I say really, I'm talking about senior level. And therefore, my question actually going back to you and Edul again is that Edul spoke about skin in the game. These senior people, should I encourage them to basically come in with invest cash and take an equity stake? Is that what you're suggesting?
There are two ways of doing it. You can have a convertible note where you can have, say, like somebody wants to put in 10,000 pounds and you give them basically you sign a promissory note type, instrument, which can be converted to equity in case you take it to the next step and you get your Series B funding, Series A, Series B, and so on. So there are many ways to address that. Second, I think Edul had mentioned about crowdfunding. That is possible, but if you are looking for really key people, they have to devote the time and the attention that a new business requires.
Yes.
Thank you, Ruyintan. We'll hand over to Noshir for his insight. Thank you, Noshir.
Thank you.
Sure. I think that I'm going to come at this from less of the technical investment advice that you've just received from Ruyintan and Edul, and say that the research that I'm familiar with and have contributed to a little bit is in the area of looking at the success of startup teams. And what we find, one of the more enduring findings is that a team setting aside the knowledge capital that these individuals bring. So in what are their own areas of expertise, et cetera, that what seems to be the sweet spot for success in a wide variety of areas of innovation, including success of Broadway musicals on the one hand, but also in other different disciplines and research, for example, and in music in another place, is to have a team where you try to have people on that core team, some of who have worked previously in that industry or in that sector, have some of those, not all, but some of those who may have even worked previously together in terms of being able to provide some kind of who've been previous. So the first category is incumbents, those who have worked in the area. Repeat incumbents are those who have worked together previously. And then the third is try to bring some newcomers, people who have not been part of this. And each of these combinations then provides the opportunity to be able to both explore new ideas, but also exploit the existing resources within this area. So keeping those kinds of criteria in your back pocket as you decide to staff the team can be quite helpful. So the main idea is, don't say, I want to have a team that are made up entirely of people who have all worked together, because actually that is not very successful in terms of keeping things fresh and innovative.
Before we hand over to...
Thank you very much.
Before we hand over to Ruyintan Mehta for the last question, in response to Ruyintan Mehta's question on what happens in the United Kingdom, it really begs the combination of intellectual, economic, and social knowledge, and the willingness to work in the domain between them, where the strength of the WZCC is. Because we have something called the Enterprise Investment Scheme, the EIS, set up by the government to give tax benefits to those people who set up new companies, to the people who invest. And there needs to be a great deal of intellectual knowledge in the investor as well, and ethics and integrity in the people who start these companies, so that this fructifies. Otherwise, people wrap up companies with the money and disappear. So with that, we come back to industry and integrity. Ruyintan Mehta, over to you.
Please unmute yourself. Karishma, read the question. I think we'll proceed that way.
Yeah.
So Ruyintan,
yeah, go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you. A lot of interesting thoughts here, and I wish I was 20 years younger to implement those. But my question here is, how do we motivate our communities to get into some of these projects? Ruyintan has a plethora of ideas and different things that he's been doing. How do we encourage our communities to get into these projects, Ruyintan? It really is very worthwhile and very satisfying, these kinds of things. So do you have some thoughts? How do we motivate our communities? Like associations, like ZAGNI, for instance, can take up a project.
Well, believe it or not, we've actually done that. Edul was the catalyst. After the fantastic Daver was built, and he was enough of an arm twister that even from a reluctant guy like me, he got a fair amount of donation to build our Daver, fair amount from my standpoint. And the next step was, there was a dream that we all believe in the concept of using the holy power of sun. So we created, Edul was the managing partner, and there are like 8 or 9 of us. Edul, correct me if I'm wrong. And we formed an entity called Z Solar, where 100% of the electrical needs of ZAGNI are now through the solar system, electrical generation system that was installed on the roof of the Daver. This gives you a classic example. And our whole concept was not for us entrepreneurs and investors to make money, but to give back to the community and essentially fulfill the purpose. So there was an economic aspect as well as there was a philanthropic aspect. That's just one example. So you can take on projects like that where the entire community hopefully can be involved. Maybe Edul can expand on it.
Yeah, no, Ruyintan's question is very critical. We do get people participating in projects. We did a solar project at the Navsari Senior Citizen Home. We did a project for clean water in one of the villages in Maharashtra. But the real question, I think, Ruyintan, is how do we get people more into considering to start businesses or taking advantage of what the programs we are offering? For example, we did this CMI program, Fly program, Ruyintan, and you're aware of it. Ruyintan sponsored it. We needed 24 students, and we completely were struggling to get 20 students from all over, anywhere from India. So, you know, so there's a little bit of, if you want to call it apathy. It was a free program, but we still struggled to get 20 students.
Super, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
And now we will be able to hear more from Edul on the 13th of February about this open book entrepreneurship. With that, I'll hand over to Farrokh Mistree.
Closing comment. These are 30-second, 1 minute closing comments. Edul?
Okay, thank you. As we have discussed today, entrepreneurship is an extremely powerful concept and tool to solve today's problems. Entrepreneurship, as I mentioned earlier in one of my questions, encourages one to be first, be different, be best. We also need to keep in mind that creating economic value cannot exist in a vacuum. We have to be conscious of creating social and intellectual value, and always keeping in mind our Zartusti values of good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And more importantly, good deeds. WZCC is also growing and evolving, embracing change. We've created financing initiatives in India and North America. We are providing interest-free loans, scholarships. As Charles Darwin had said, it is not the strongest of the species who survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. So let me end by saying that today is the right time for the right idea, and opportunities are limitless for the bold and restless who are willing to dream big and work hard without fearing failure. Get up and try again until they succeed, and then they will find that nothing beats success more than success itself. So once again, to end my comments with, if you can dream it, you can do it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ruyintan.
As I mentioned, technology-enabled philanthropy is the motto that I follow. But more important, the oft-repeated phrase, Parsi, thy name is charity, is not an inappropriate phrase. No less a person than Mahatma Gandhi has said that I'm proud of my country, India, for having produced the splendid Zoroastrian stock in numbers beneath contempt, but in charity and philanthropy, perhaps unequaled and certainly unsurpassed. There is a difference between charity and philanthropy. In charity, you are basically addressing the symptom. But when you talk about philanthropy, it is basically a little bit different. You can broadly define it as a love for humanity, and it tends to strike at the root of various issues facing society. The one that I've been following are areas related to water, health, education, energy, livelihoods, and sustainability. So dig in there, follow your passion, follow the technology that will help you come up with solutions to help others and humanity.
Thank you. Noshir.
What I would say is to add to what Edul and Ruyintan and the entire conversation, which I found to be really quite inspiring and informative, is that for the purpose of this seminar, Farrokh, in his infinite wisdom, sort of created these three separate islands of social value and economic and intellectual value. And while that certainly provides a good organizing scheme for us to have the kinds of conversations we've had today, I'm even more convinced as we've been talking that these three are also interconnected in reality, and that for the purpose of having a conversation, it's nice to each of us to sort of delve deeper into one of these areas. But I would not want, in general, for our audience to take away from this that they need to choose and pick which one they want to focus on, but instead to be able to recognize that this is a much more holistic enterprise, and that there is in some ways a great deal of interconnectivity that goes back and forth between the creation of intellectual value, creation of social value, and as well as economic value. And you could almost think of it as the sort of tripod on which the Zoroastrian community can help serve as a beacon to others in the world.
Thank you. Karishma.
We at the Zoroastrian Faculty Network, as part of the World Zartushti Chamber of Commerce, seek not just to catalyze this growth of the intellectual, social, and economic domain, but also respond. So we have responded to students in the past, and today we will also respond to what Zubin Setna has said. We will seek to build this whole encyclopedia, as it were, of such projects. So with this, I'll invite Edul and Ruyintan to send me a list of what they have done, and anybody else around the world in the Zoroastrian community to send me a list of their projects, which we can then compile. Thank you.
Great. Justy.
Yeah, what do I say? What a wonderful session with lots and lots of information and inspiration. We must spread the word. The idea is to spread the word to the community and have more and more participation of the youth. We have a website, which is zoroastrianfacultynetwork.org. If you register yourself at the website, you will get all the information on scholarships, internships, webinars, etc. We have a Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel. So please spread the word to friends and family as much as possible. Thank you very much.
It is my pleasure now to invite Mayor Amal Sahib to share with us his closing comments. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you, Farrokh. A wise person once said, destiny is not forged by the shoes you wear, but by the steps you take. And having said that, that was a very insightful presentation filled with some remarkable gems of wisdom. The first gems of wisdom came from our Edul, when he focused on entrepreneurship in the pursuit of opportunity using creativity. By building the spirit of entrepreneurship, he was very focused on if you can dream it, you can do it using confidence, discipline, and character. I'd just like to add one more thing, that works only when in life what you emphasize multiplies and unifies, because what you emphasize will either maximize or minimize your opportunities in life. Having said that, let's go to gem number 2 that came from our tech guru, Ruyintan Mehta. He mentions about his social impact by creating social value. One thing that he talked about really got my attention, and he talked about remain secular. Very, very valuable point, because I personally believe that religion feeds you about the divine, but meditation leads you into the divine. And to be secular, one has to live a life of being meditation to build a value-based life. The third gem of wisdom came from our friend Noshir, in which he talked about think networks with the Zoroastrian zest and zeal. I believe that network helps one to build net worth with self-worth. So how do we do that is very important to understand. And that is by understanding that each one, reach one, and teach one. When your reaching reaches the heart, your teaching teaches the mind, and that eaching in each one of you touches the soul. Unless you are not able to reach the heart, you will not be able to teach the mind or touch the soul. That inspiration in the heart leads to the motivation in the mind, which brings transformation in the soul. And I strongly believe that that's what seems to be the mission and vision of ZFN. And I want to thank Edul, Farrokh, Ruyintan, Noshir, Karishma, Karen, Vispi, Zian for the valuable gift of this inspiration. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you all very much. We have to call it quits because there's another meeting that Yazdi is sponsoring. So Yazdi, thank you very much indeed. We will not be sticking around because Yazdi has to use this ZFN, his Zoom link for another meeting. So thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you next month.